All right, guys, second video we are recording here today. So if you guys watched last week, yep, we're recording back to back, and we're going to be talking about kind of the skill sets that you need to be or have to become an AI engineer, and also kind of how to constantly improve your skill set because a lot of the stuff within AI engineering roles have changed. I would assume quite a lot the last 6 months, the last 12 months. It's something that's still being developed and um, not all the same skills are going to be applicable maybe in a year in the future, 2 years in the future, but at least we're going to talk about it right now, May of 2025. Matt knows way, way more about AI engineering than I do because I can't even technically use OpenAI at work. We'll talk about that another day. But yeah, I'm excited for this video because that is something I want to put a lot of time and research in once it is approved. I have literally a list of like 10 different app ideas I want to build out. So I want to pick your brain on this side of things.
Yeah, let's roll.
Yeah. So how I at least interpret it, right? One of the first skill sets, obviously, that anyone in data should pick up is going to be Python because a lot of the different libraries out there are going to utilize Python that side of things. When I first started learning a little bit about AI engineering, I got put into LangChain because it really connects really easily with OpenAI. If you use Gemini or any other type of large language model out there, you can port it pretty quickly. I know probably LangChain has changed a lot since the videos I produced here on the channel, but would that probably be the first package that you start studying and learning the concepts, or would you go with a different approach?
I'm gonna try to. I actually think you should focus on.
I'm gonna predict that you're gonna say prompting techniques first before LangChain.
I'm gonna go. I think there's like higher level concepts that you should focus on because tools are always going to change, right? LangChain was really popular when it first came out 2 years ago. Now there's some new stuff. So I think tools change enough that although you want to be good at them, you really want to be really great at like the high level concepts around what those tools do so that you can kind of, as things change, you can kind of plug and play them a little bit. I think that model fine tuning is probably the first one I would do before prompts. If you want to do prompting, I'm not gonna fault you for starting with that. I actually think that's kind of fine. I think fine tuning models and just the general concepts around how to do that. Models are going to be different in the ways that stuff works. But if you understand, setting up your data set for it, if you understand, parameters, if you understand, training workflows and more of those high level concepts, do I know how to fine tune every model in Hugging Face? Absolutely not. But I know the concepts around model tuning, and so when I need to do one, if it's new, then they all follow a lot of the same concepts behind the way that they work. And so the first one I would really want to focus on is just understanding how to do that. You can pick some popular ones to kind of get used to, like an LLM or like a BERT model or like a computer vision model, like more of like the standard stuff, and then go into the weeds a little bit based on what you want to do or what you like to do the most. But just general concepts around how to do that process and how to set up the data and how to, look at the way that it's done and things like that is probably where I would start.
And then you jump probably into like some vector databases, learning how those operate with embeddings and different things like that, or where do you jump into next?
I think the next one would be evaluation. The number one thing you'll actually get asked this more than you will, in my experience, like what models to use is how do you evaluate the models. So like, if you're talking to somebody about, hey, I need a chatbot built for blah, blah, blah. They might ask you about like what you do. You can say you fine tune models or whatever. There's so many different approaches. They probably won't care that much. But then they'll ask, how do you evaluate it? How do you evaluate it for performance? How do you evaluate it for accuracy? And that's a very direct workflow to stakeholders. So a lot of the people hiring are going to care about that at a pretty high level. I think that understanding how to do evaluation, the different metrics, the different scoring techniques, the different ways you build your data sets for evaluation. I think evaluation as a whole is definitely the one that I would focus on. And then based on the models that you were fine tuning before, understanding the best practices for the different use cases and domains, and then the models that go with them. Evaluation is definitely the second one I would do. You can fine tune a model. If you don't know how to evaluate it, you're just gonna go, okay, like I did this. I don't know if it's good or not. I don't know if you can't evaluate it.
So to poke you, let's say you have an e-commerce site, right? And you're going to be building out a chatbot for that website, specifically one that's customer facing, where someone might ask, hey, I want to buy a product. Let's say I need a new running hat because this hat is broken, it's destroyed from being in the washer. So I need a new running hat. And how would you go and evaluate that type of scenario if you're going to be building that out for a customer, that the bot works correctly, that someone can go on the bot, talk about needing a new running hat for a race, and then the bot correctly predicts, this is the type of hat that you should be purchasing.
Yeah, and you actually pick kind of an interesting one, because that uses both sort of explicit and implicit evaluation techniques to really know what you're doing. And the difference between those are ones that are model specific. So you're evaluating the models in that pipeline. And then the other one is evaluating the actual results at a business level. So what I would have is I would have evaluation metrics that are specific to the pipeline I built. Let's say it's a standard RAG chatbot. I'm going to have a recall score with the embedding model. I'm going to have some sort of framework like a rank me or something like that for the actual chatbot. I'm going to have maybe some of the other sort of like model specific LLM, like hallucination ones and things like that. So I'm going to have my evaluation metrics that are specific to a model. And this pipeline has a couple of different models, so I'm going to have different ones for each one. And then I'm probably going to have ones that are more on the business side, which is, let's say you roll this out into production. Maybe you're tracking, how many purchases came from the chatbot. You're tracking like some sort of conversion metric. You're tracking how many times the customers clicked out of the chatbot if you're trying to figure out, if you're trying to improve retention. So you're going to have kind of these business level ones, that are more focused on like, hey, whatever the goal of the chatbot was, you're going to track different metrics around. But then you as an AI engineer and as a data scientist are going to have metrics focused around the actual models you built. And those are going to kind of play together, right? If they say, hey, we're not, customers are complaining that the results aren't related to their query that they're asking about, well, then you're going to go back and you're going to look at your metrics related to your model to see, hey, okay, well, we're actually not pulling the correct product into our chatbot at a high enough frequency, the recall. Our hallucination metrics are too high, so we're talking about products we don't even sell. So you're going to have kind of both of those metrics. You're going to focus as an AI engineer, on a team. You're going to be much more focused on the metrics surrounding the models. But you are probably going to play with a little bit of both of those. You're going to want to understand them for the models you use. Any of the models that you're using, you really should understand those metrics that make the most sense for what those specifically are, because they're going to differ based on the different types of models that you're using.
And that goes back into the first part of the conversation, fine tuning, right? So if we have the hallucinations, we have to go back and fine tune the models so that way we don't have, the wrong running hat on the website. And you have the bad hat, or you have actually a decent hat that you want to purchase.
And you'll get used to which metrics kind of dominate the others in terms of value. Like that just comes from doing it. Some models are very easy where like there's just like an F1 score and that's kind of it. Some that are more of a pipeline, like the chatbot you mentioned, there's so many different pieces in there that some are going to affect others, and so those are going to be more important. The recall one is definitely going to be the most valuable one in that example, but you're going to see that as you kind of go and work with the different models, and then especially putting them into a pipeline where they kind of affect each other.
And also to reiterate on this, I love how you're saying precision recall F1 score, because this is going to go back into machine learning, right? So if anyone's run any type of machine learning models, right, you would know that these are metrics that we use on that side of things. So there's also a crossover on the AI side of things where we're going to want to use that as well. So I
Yeah,
do
you're going to
have,
be using those same ones. Yeah,
yeah, and I was
absolutely.
going to say I have a video coming out really soon on confusion matrix. So definitely check that one out when it
Yeah,
is. I want to say it's going to come out in July, which sounds crazy because we're recording this in May, but usually I
yeah,
have a month and a half to 2 month backlog already of videos recorded here on the channel. So
yeah.
um, yeah, those metrics are super important. And jumping when I first jumped from data analytics, data science, I didn't appreciate them as much as I should have. Just like really understanding all these type of things that I should know, because there's
Well,
more.
so
I'll go ahead.
well, and what I was going to say is the reason those stakeholders are going to care, in my opinion, more about the evaluation metrics than the actual tools that you use. They're going to want to make sure you're not a complete idiot and you're using something that's crazy. But because the reason they care is that the evaluation metrics help you make decisions to improve the system, right? Based on the scores that you see, based on the results, you then make your iterations to the models and to the pipelines based on those. That the evaluation drives the decision making of what you do with your pipeline. And so that's the reason why they care so much about your understanding of what those tools are and what they mean, is because that's going to completely decide what you do. If the recall is low, we're going to have one approach. If the hallucination is bad, we're going to have one approach. So that's all going to kind of decide the improvements that we make.
And those improvements, right? They could be as simple as turning down the temperature or increasing the temperature as a parameter, right? Like how often do you see something like that? Just easy enough as changing the temperature impacts the model.
Huh. With LLMs, it's not as easy. With other, like, let's say you fine tuned a BERT model,
Sure.
your approach can be pretty straightforward if you understand your task. Normally, something like that, with like a BERT approach, like a classification use case, maybe you just don't have enough data for some sort of edge case, or you don't have enough data supporting something in the test data set or something. LLM's a little bit of a different animal. Um, because there can be a lot of reasons why the hallucination score is high. There's a lot of reasons why recall, and there's actually a lot of different routes you should take. LLMs are a little bit of a different animal, because their evaluation is in it's just by nature, with it being feed forward, it's not as easy to kind of pull apart. Um, but sometimes it is, it's a use case by use case basis. Sometimes it is like, hey, your temperature is too high, you want to turn it down, you need your model to be a little bit more deterministic. I find it's never that easy, because if you kind of know what you're doing, then like, hey, my temperature is going to adjust this, so I know what to do with it. It's it's something you get used to over time. You're not going to know exactly what to do out of the gate. Um, and if you did, then you probably just guessed and you got it right, or you've done it before. But you get used to it. There's a lot of research papers out there right now on it, so you kind of get used to seeing the same stuff.
So a few approaches that we can continue with. Any other skills you'd say right away, or do you want to jump into kind of projects to kind of upskill on that side of things? Because I feel projects are the best way to get your hands dirty, learn the skill sets. Although there's a lot of templatized projects out there, albeit there's a lot of YouTube tutorials on them.
Yeah.
But that'll get you at least understanding how fine tuning, getting used to vector databases, RAG applications. So any other skills you want to jump into, or let's maybe talk about some types of projects?
Prompting.
Yeah, that's
I
the
mean,
given
at
one.
this point,
You should be prompting every day.
yeah. I mean, even if your role doesn't, if your role isn't like a prompt engineer, like, they're gonna ask you about it. Do you have to be a like an over the top expert? Maybe not. It depends on what the role is or what you want to do. But at this point, I really don't know how you get around it. I mean, we get asked about prompting on things that don't include prompting. I don't know why. I don't know why they. I don't know. Like, I don't know why people do that, but you just do at this point. that's probably the next one that I would focus on. I would really understand prompting frameworks and the way that these models work, the nature of how they work with the next step token. Like I would understand that, at least so that you're dangerous and can do some stuff when if the time comes, or if it's an approach that makes sense.
So let's jump into some projects then. So let's say you're a data scientist right now, or you're a software engineer. You're trying to jump into becoming an AI engineer. Obviously, two different types of backgrounds, but what are some type of projects that you would really recommend to someone to really start learning these skill sets?
I mean, I think that RAG chatbots are a really good one. I don't know how long that runway is going to be as good for people to use or not. I don't know how long that's going to be, but I would say, like, right now, um, you should. I would start simple. I would start with simple RAG, um, handful of documents, simple queries, um, base embedding model. I would start with easier use cases. And then I would try to ramp yourself up to stuff that gets a little bit more complex, maybe a lot of documents, maybe complex documents, complex queries. Maybe those are multi step. Maybe those are short query, long output expected. Different models. So you can kind of show, like, hey, I don't need the biggest, most expensive model. My prompts are really good. I can use a smaller one. Um, I just think RAG chatbots you should probably do. They're so easy to get off the ground as a project and start, like, iterating and improving. It's something that's actually impressive. Um, I would probably, for most roles, do that. Like, I probably would, unless you're an academic who has, like, ridiculous research papers that show you, like, know some crazy domain super well. Like, I would probably do RAG chatbots. That's what, if I was applying to jobs today, that's what I would do.
And we've talked about it, standing out. How do you stand out on just a RAG chatbot?
It's got to be in some way, shape, or form complex. Either the domain, the data, the model, the results. One of those has to be very impressive. You did it in a complex domain. The data is either really messy or really hard or really large. You did it with a model that is hard to use. Maybe it's small or something. Or your results are just insane. The accuracy score you got is insane because you use some technique that is better than everyone else. Any of those I think would be pretty good. I would tailor it towards, like, what do you actually want to do? What type of roles are you looking for? Because what's nice about RAG is there's so many different things in that puzzle that you can show you're really good at. You're really good at prompting. You're really good at fine tuning. You're really good at sort of the data side of structuring the data in a way that's easy to retrieve and use in a model. Like, there's so many different things that you can pick one and be, like, really, really good at, and it will cover one of those criteria points.
No, that makes a lot of sense on there. And what do you think? One project will cut it today, or do you think you need to have two, three, four projects?
It depends on how impressive they are. I mean, maybe you go wide and do, like, three or four, and then, like, whichever one you actually think you can improve the most, that's the one that you do. Or you think is the most impressive, that's the one that you do. Because they're so easy to set up that you could do, like, a
Keep it up.
million of them, and then
Yeah.
just, like, figure out, like, which one is actually giving you the best chance of a successful, like, impressive project.
So let's move to the next step, right? You've learned these skill sets, you've studied for a little bit, right? And I'm not saying these people that say you can become an AI engineer by just studying 40 hours. Like, you got to put more than 40 hours into studying this and understanding the concepts. So you studied the concepts, right? You built out, let's say, two different projects off of RAG applications. And now you're starting to apply for different jobs. And obviously in this market, job applications are bloated. You'll see 100, 200. There's probably not that many qualified applicants to be an AI engineer today. But let's say you get your first interview, right? So how does the interview process work today? to be an AI engineer, right? Are we going through leak code type questions? Are we just asking information on what it's like to fine tune models? Like, how does that approach work today in 2025?
If these are introduction roles, fresh out of school, junior level, stuff like that, you are probably going to do some leak code. I know that seems wild to think about for like an AI engineer junior role, but you probably are. It depends on how much software engineering is involved in the role specifically, but you should probably just prep for some level of leak code, maybe like a medium difficulty or something. But you'll probably have some of those. You will, you'll either have like a take home project or like an in person sort of like, not project, but do something in person, showing that you like know what you're doing and you can like build something or whatever. And then they'll ask about your resume. That's where you can highlight some of that stuff around those results. Although they've already seen it to get you to this point, you do want to talk about it and highlight it. You want to be able to talk about the stuff that you did. This is one of the steps where they're going to figure out, did you actually do any of this stuff or not? So be prepared to like really talk about the stuff that you did, the challenges that came up, the results that you got, the data. You're going to want to have as many sort of granular points in there as possible to show like, I actually did this. I actually know what I'm doing. But I would be prepped for some leak code. They'll probably do some data work. They'll want to see if you can, do some of the data stuff, and you can prep for fine tuning and stuff like that. As you move up in the higher levels, it's going to be less like you won't get like a leak code or something. But early intro, like I think you're still going to have to do that stuff. And they're probably going to give you a take home project or some sort of like in-person whiteboarding session about like a problem or something.
That makes a lot of sense. And how fast do you think you could progress in this career? Obviously, the field is changing quite a bit. I mean, this answer might have changed differently if it was answered, 6 months ago than compared to today. But what does kind of the role progression look like right now? And then I guess any final thoughts on this role in the future?
I think that unfortunately, I actually think the progression part depends quite a bit on the company and what they're having you specifically do. Because there are certain skill sets that are required as you really move up. And if the company isn't giving you those opportunities to do those things, about this, then it can be a little bit more of a challenge. That's why you see people leave roles to go into other ones where they might have a little bit more of that ability. I think if you are improving at those three things, the evaluation, the fine tuning, and then like prompting, data stuff, kind of the natural progression should keep you moving in the right direction as long as you're actually doing things that matter. Depends on company size as well. Larger companies, it's probably not as easy to just have that natural progression, due to what a lot of that at bigger companies, depending on what you're working on, and you don't have control over what you're working on. That's why I said it's kind of company related.
And it's kind of luck on that side of things too,
Yeah,
which a lot of people say, but
because you get to work on so many different things at smaller companies, it's probably a little bit easier because your resume is going to boost out quite a bit. And whether that's internal growth or finding another company that wants to give you those opportunities, at least you've had those opportunities. Whereas a larger one, probably not as much. And you can have success at a larger one and still not move up just due to, like I said,
politics,
the work that you're doing and stuff like that. So it depends a little bit.
Yeah. And I think that's a wrap for our AI engineer video. We might do a follow-up on this if anyone is interested below. So just leave some comments on there. I know once I start building out some AI applications later this year, we'll talk about not everything in those projects, but at least some high-level details on this, because I am excited to start those. And let us know other office hours as well, because we were trying to record 1 episode a week. We have one-on-one mentorships down below. We have our website also down below, which we're starting to populate with more articles. We're trying our best to produce as much content here as possible. 3 videos a week, which is a lot, guys. So if you are getting value, make sure to subscribe and join our Discord. See you in another video.